Okay, thank you everybody for joining us this afternoon for our free webinar for Wednesday, April 28th. It's 4:30 p.m. So today's presentation and webinar is going to be on integrating social media analytics into your trading strategy with Lightspeed. So just before we get started, I do have to read a disclaimer, and also I'd like to share some useful information with you as well. So hang on just a second. This presentation is for informational purposes only. Nothing presented today should be construed as investment advice or a recommendation to buy, sell, or hold any security or contracts. Since we don't know everyone's investment objectives or risk tolerance, we are not endorsing any specific trading strategies. Security, derivative, and futures trading involves the substantial risk of loss and is not suitable for all investors. Each investor must consider whether this is a suitable investment, since you may lose all of or more than your initial investment. Past performance is not indicative of future results. Lightspeed Financial Services Group, LLC is not affiliated with these third-party market commentators, educators, or service providers. Data, information, and material content are provided for informational and educational purposes only. This content neither is nor should be construed as an offer, solicitation, or recommendation to buy or sell any securities or contracts. Any investment decisions made by the user through the use of such content is solely based on the user's independent analysis, taking into consideration your financial circumstances, investment objectives, and risk tolerance. Lightspeed Financial Services Group, LLC does not endorse, offer, nor recommend any of the services or commentary provided by any of the market commentators, educators, or service providers, and any information used to execute any trading strategies are solely based on the independent analysis of the user. Thank you. If you have any questions after today's presentation, please feel free to email us at sales@lightspeed.com. So today's guest speaker is going to be Joe Gits. He is a pioneer in the emergence and growth of quantitative trading systems. Prior to launching Social Market Analytics, he co-founded Quantitative Analytics Incorporated, a market-leading provider of integrated database solutions for quantitative researchers and traders. So just really quickly here, before I pass the reins over to Joe, I did want to make you all aware that we are currently running a promo. The code is 10K2021. So if you just put this promo code in the promo code section while you are completing your application online, we would be able to open the account with this promotional code enabled. So this will get you a rebate up to $10,000 cash back through 50% of your equities and options commissions after the first 90 days after your account has been opened, and you will be getting that rebate within 45 days of the end of the promotional period. So keep that in mind. And if you do want to open an account with us, you can navigate and find that area by going to our homepage, lightspeed.com, and you'll see here, the top right-hand corner, open account. If you click on that, it'll take you to the first page and the first step in the process. Additionally, if you want to sign up for a demo, you can certainly do that too. We offer free 10-day demos that use 15-minute delayed market data. You can click on the try a demo button in the top right-hand corner and provide the information requested, and we would be sending you your login credentials shortly thereafter. So I'm going to hand it over to Joe here. So bear with me just a moment, and everybody sit tight, and thank you for joining us again, and enjoy. Joe, here you go.
All right. Now I just want to make sure you all can see my screen. Can you guys see my screen okay? Can everyone see my screen? Oh.
We've got a yes from Ron, so I think you're good to go. I can also see your screen as well.
All right, and can you see the control panel on the right, or is that hidden from you guys?
That is hidden, so both Paulo and Ron confirming that they can see your screen, so feel free to go ahead.
Well, first of all, thanks guys for having me on this webinar, and thanks so much for the really cool implementations of our data on the Lightspeed platform. We're going to walk through some of these implementations today, and I think you guys are going to enjoy this. So let me do this. So my agenda for this afternoon is, first of all, I'm going to talk about the use of alternative data in finance. It's growing exponentially, so we're going to talk a little bit about that and how people are using it. We're going to talk about what we do and how we analyze the content to add value for active traders, hedge funds, money managers, risk departments, the people involved in the evaluation of securities. what social media in general can offer every investor, and then how the widgets implemented by Lightspeed on your platform can help you guys in your day-to-day trading and security evaluation. Okay, and I am very open for questions, so if anybody wants to put any questions out there, please go ahead and type them in, and I'd be happy to answer them. So this is a funny part of my presentation because it used to be much more important that I discuss social media and what it means and how it's moving security. So I'm going to go a little bit faster over this section. So there are roughly 1 billion tweets a day, and everyone now knows what a tweet is, and they're generated worldwide. And this heat map that I'm showing you is an overlay of the number of tweets with countries, the origin of those tweets. And what you see is that tweets are coming from financial centers in general. And this communication is happening, as I said, 1 billion times a day. And so if you can glean that effectively, if you can read that effectively, you're going to get breaking news, leading information, you're going to get product discussions, you're going to get a lot of valuable information. And so what we're doing is we're basically grabbing that disruptive information, and we're using that to help predict security returns, security prices, volatility, and different metrics like that. Okay, so SMA is a licensed Twitter partner. So we're harnessing these Twitter signals to basically help risk managers, traders, active traders like yourself make better decisions. It's an input into your evaluation toolbox to make better decisions based on what you're seeing in the Twitter platform. And really, I'm going to date myself, but what I think of Twitter as, it's the feeling of the pit. So I started my career in the trading pits, and you could feel the energy in the pit increase prior to market moves, or the noise and different activity like that. And if you're thinking about social media and specifically Twitter, it's the modern day equivalent of the feeling of the pit or the noise of the pit. Okay. All right, so what do we do? So we actually have 4 patents on our ability to go in and grab information from Twitter and run our metrics. As I mentioned earlier, we do have a license access to the Twitter Firehose. We're one of a very few firms that have access to that Twitter Firehose. And we built a 3-component system, and I'll explain why this is important to you as a Lightspeed customer and how the data that we're giving you is the most complete. So the extractor is basically a source agnostic retrieval platform that grabs anything related to topics that we're interested in. So we're not just grabbing, probably the most common question that I get, we're not just grabbing $ ticker. We're not even just grabbing company name. We're grabbing those 2 items. We're grabbing major products. We're nodding out certain things. So if you're thinking about, for example, Tesla, you're gonna want Elon Musk. You're not gonna want Nikolai Tesla. You're gonna want Model X. You're gonna want Solar City. You're gonna want TSLA. So when we're extracting, we're listening to a whole series of machine learned identifiers for the topics that we're interested in, and that goes into an archive. Then the evaluator does a couple of different things. So first, it looks at the account that actually put that tweet out there. So one of the things that we learned very early on is that it's not just what's being said, but who's saying it. So we actually have developed an algorithm that ranks each individual Twitter account based on 12 different metrics. And those metrics are things like how accurate are they when they're positive or negative on a particular security going out a certain period of time? How often are they retweeted? How often are they replied to? One of the items that we don't use is number of followers, because that's one that can be gamed. We look at followers to following ratios, but we don't actually use number of followers in our metrics. So the evaluator looks at the account, and then it actually reads and calculates a whole series of metrics that describe that current conversation. So it's a multi-pass phrase evaluation approach with our own custom patented natural language processing that scores each individual tweet from -1 to +1 in a fine-grained score. You'll see, and if you're looking into this type of technology, you'll see different firms that do what's called bucketing, positive or negative. You'll see a multi-bucket type, so positive, neutral, negative. We actually read and score each tweet programmatically in 0.3 of a second and then score that particular tweet, and we aggregate it a couple different ways, which we'll explore. And then the calculator calculates metrics on that data. So we're publishing how the overall conversation on that particular security compares to prior conversations on that security. And we basically group it by each individual security. So there's no way that you can compare the social media conversation on Tesla with the social media conversation on a SPAC, as an example. So we create baselines for each individual security and then go in and calculate the metrics based on those baselines. And we'll get into those metrics in a second. So why is our data, or why is what we're doing the most effective way to calculate these social media metrics? And we'll get into the implementations in a second, but I want to hit on this IP. So when you're looking at financial data, one of the key components of that data is basically out of sample history. So the data that you're running your backtest on, or the data you're running your analysis on, you don't want to look at it as it is now. You want to look at it as it was at each individual point in time. So all of our data is out of sample. We've been doing it since December 1st of 2011 was our first out of sample pull. So all the evolutions of our natural language processing, all the evolutions of our account rating, that's all been applied on a carry forward basis. So when you're looking at the data and when we're looking at our models and running our supervised and unsupervised machine learning and AI, all of that data is suitable for back testing. The complex topic modeling, and I talked about this a little bit already, and basically what we're doing is we're not just grabbing $ ticker, because you won't get the full conversation on it. So the complex topic modeling that we created, it's a rules-based machine learning. It actually reads a whole set of tweets and then makes suggestions on the different topics that users may want to be interested in. So the complex topic modeling, it basically evolves over time as new products are added, as new terms are added. That's something that keeps the feed fresh and up to date with the most accurate information. And then there's a lot of independent research on our data. We publish some of our own, but there's a lot of independent research on our data done by various firms. So you can go to our website and grab that if you want, but it does have independent verification of the predictive nature of the data. SMA sentiment natural language processing. Well, when we started this way back, as I mentioned in 2011, we were using the Stanford natural language processor, and we evolved pretty quickly out of that. We do have our own natural language processing capability. We have, I want to say, over 50,000 phrases and wildcards and lematizations and multiplications on that data. We read a tweet up to 8 times to make sure that we're getting the context correct, we're getting the security identifiers correct. Source ratings I already spoke about, and then our parsing engine, so we can go in and read that. So let's get to the interesting stuff. How you can use the Lightspeed platform to help you trade. So let me jump in. Okay. The metrics that you see on the Lightspeed platform are basically Z-scores. So what we're doing is we are calculating a baseline for every security, and then we're looking at comparisons of the current conversation relative to that historical baseline. So the idea being that if the current conversation on that particular security is 2 standard deviations more positive than normal, that means that the conversation is more positive than 96% of prior conversations on that security. If the S score, and we'll talk about that as we look at some of the implementations, is more -2 or less, that means the current conversation is more negative than 96% of prior conversations over that baseline. And so, as you could probably guess, when the conversation gets a lot more positive, those securities tend to outperform, and when those securities get a lot more negative, those securities tend to underperform. And so you'll see how that's a useful tool in your investing toolbox. And so let's get into some of the more detail. And so the metrics that we're seeing are describing that standard normal curve. And we have a number of different metrics that are implemented, and this is probably taking you back to your high school or college stats class, so I apologize for that right off the bat. All right. So how can Lightspeed traders use this data in their daily process as well. Number one, it's an indicator of price movement of securities. Now, obviously, it's not the only indicator of price movement of securities, but it is definitely predictive of security returns. Now, the interesting part of this type of data is that most securities are going to be hovering around a normal level of conversation. Okay, so when we get on the edges of that curve, that's when it starts being predictive. And so Lightspeed has implemented a lot of nice widgets for identifying those securities that are acting abnormally positive or negative. Okay, so as you see in this bullet point, securities being discussed more positively, they tend to outperform, whether it's an earnings beat or whether it's a drug approval. It could be a technical conversation crossing above a moving average. So when that gets aggregated and more positive, those securities outperform. New trading ideas, and this is one of the things that customers like a lot with our data. So, we can help you trade better by being an indicator of movement of securities, but we can also bring new ideas to you. So nobody, people trade the FANG stocks, obviously. So what social media does is it brings to the surface stocks that maybe you didn't come into the morning having on your trading plan. And so it brings new ideas, new securities that perhaps you didn't think of coming into your trading day. Obviously, position monitoring. So if you have a position in a security and you see that sentiment's starting to move against you, maybe you can modify your position or maybe take some kind of, use some kind of risk aversion strategies. And then trade execution. So if you're planning on buying a security and it has a positive sentiment, there are indications that that may move higher. So it can help you trade, trade more effectively. Okay. These are just a few of the benefits that the Lightspeed widgets can offer you. All right. So now we're gonna actually walk through some of the widgets, and these are offered on Lightspeed Trader, and they're in production, and people are liking these quite a bit. So we're going to look at the top 10 sentiment and how that widget is put together. The bottom 10 sentiment, which I'm probably not breaking any news, is the opposite of the top 10 sentiment. Accurate account long side, and this is a unique one and I think a very powerful one, and we'll talk about that in a second. Accurate account short side, and then sentiment by symbol. Yeah, so if you wanted to type in a security and see the individual sentiment, you can do that. All right. So the widget shows this particular widget. It's updated real time, and it's showing at any point in time securities that have the top sentiment, at that point in time. So, obviously you see rank, that's 1 to 10 of at that point in time, what are the securities that have an S score, meaning the tone of the current conversation is a lot more positive than normal. Relative to the baseline for that particular security. Then you have the ticker symbol. Then you have, and these are links, so sentiment by symbol. So if you click on that, it goes to the sentiment by symbol page. You have your description, obviously what that security is, and then you have the metrics. Okay, so S score is where you are on that standard normal curve. So I'm going to go up a second. I'll stay here for a second. So S score is where you are on that standard normal curve. So if you go back to that bell curve that we were just looking at, Diffusion Pharmaceuticals at this point in time was the single highest sentiment scored security at that moment. And maybe that was a drug approval or whatever, but it was a single most positive security based on social media compared to its 20-day baseline. Volume. Now volume is an interesting number because the volume is what we call the indicative volume. Those are tweets that have predictive power from those certified accounts. So as I mentioned, we filter the accounts. When you get a high enough ranking based on our multi-factor scoring system, you're included in our metrics going forward. So the actual raw volume is usually about 10 to 12 times that. But once we filter for those accounts, and that's a very secretive IP that we have, that's what's left for that particular security. And then SV score is relative volume. So it's volume on that standard normal curve. So is the current volume significantly higher than the tweet volume for that particular security? Again, you can't really compare Twitter volume across securities, only because then you get firms like, you get Tesla, you get the FANG stocks, you get GameStop that have a tremendous amount of volume. So this particular diffusion pharmaceuticals had a very high sentiment score and a very high relative volume. Now I'm going to take a breath. Are there any questions right off the bat, guys, moderators?
No questions so far, but everybody, please do feel free to ask any questions should you have any as they come up. I'm sure that we'll be happy to answer them once the presentation is over or in the middle of the presentation as well.
Absolutely, absolutely, no problem. Oh, I'm sorry. All right, bottom 10. As you could probably tell, that is the opposite of the top 10, the most negative security. So these are the stocks that people on social media are talking most negatively about relative to the baseline for that particular security. Again, these update every minute, so they are accounting for breaking news, and you will see breaking news reflected in both the S score and the SV score very quickly. Very quickly. The sentiment scores are fairly sensitive. They will change throughout the day. So this is a good widget to go to on a regular basis. And again, we're looking at the S score. That means genetic technologies, the current conversation is more negative than pretty much 99% of the prior conversations over that 20-day period. Volume, and then SV score with a very high volume. So a very negative conversation, as well as a very high number of tweets talking about that particular security relative to that particular security. Okay, so, and again, this is a very good report to look at on a regular basis because you're going to see that breaking news. Accurate account long side. Now, I spoke a little bit earlier about the account filtering that we do. So we're looking for, again, it's not just what's being said, but who's saying it. All right, so as I mentioned, one of the things we do is we go through and we rank individual accounts. One of the metrics that this particular report is most commonly compared to would be kind of a best analyst type of report. And so one of the metrics that we track is the accuracy of the individual Twitter accounts. So when someone ends the day with a positive conversation on a particular security, what percentage of the time does that security move higher over a weighted average period of time? So a day, a week, I think it's a couple of weeks, and then a month. And then we rank these accounts, and they are basically our best account universe, so the most accurate accounts. And so this is a really unique report because what it shows is, hey, out of the best, what are they positive on? What are they negative on? And customers can use this again to maybe find securities that they didn't come in on their trading plan, and brings a new idea to the table. So for example, on this particular report, 80% of the accurate accounts are positive about microchip technology. We don't have any negatives. The difference between the positive and negative is neutral on that particular day. And then there's also a variable in here called your different holding periods. So here, actually, it's 1 day, 2 day, 1 week, and 1 month. So if you're looking at who is the most accurate over a week holding period, you can change that toggle, and you'll see that both the securities as well as the numbers will change. And then the 1 month holding period. Okay, so, and then these are the number of accurate accounts that are actually discussing that particular security right now. And again, this actually changes. Again, I think this is a daily number, and I believe this is a daily number, and it's looking at the top 100 most accurate accounts occurring in our accurate account universe. And so not every accurate account is going to be talking about every security every day. So we go in and we filter that to the individual securities that people are talking about. Opposite side. So, and this is funny that the most negative one on this particular day is actually Twitter. I should have looked at that one, but for the most accurate accounts, so 11 of those accurate accounts are actually talking about Twitter. 36% of those are positive, and 45% of those are negative for a 1 day holding period. So these two widgets, the accurate account positive and the accurate account negative, those might be widgets that you want to check maybe when you're coming in the morning and starting your trading day. And then we have the sentiment by symbols. Okay, so basically you can enter an individual security. It's going to show you a number of different things, and I like this chart a lot. So enter a security, and on all the other widgets, the ticker symbol is a hyperlink. So you can click on that symbol and go to this particular page, but it basically gives you a little bit of a dashboard on that particular security and the overall sentiment world for that particular security. And there's an item here that hasn't appeared on any of the other widgets that I like quite a bit. And so S-score, we kind of already talked about. So that is how the conversation shapes up relative to other conversations on that particular security. And again, if the S-score is around 0, that means the conversation is normal. And for Apple, a negative 1.49, that's a pretty negative conversation. Not super negative, but it's a pretty negative conversation. And volume is only a little bit higher than normal. You know, again, so SV score, if you have a 0 S score and a 0 SV score, that means it's a completely normal day for that particular security. Volume is that indicative tweet volume. And then dispersion. Now, dispersion, one of the things that I get, one of the questions that I often get when I'm talking to a group is, gosh, what if someone's trying to game the system? Well, a couple ways that we catch that. One is we have that that universe of securities that we've gone through and we've ranked, and we have a baseline for each individual account. I'm not securities. We have these accounts that we go through and rank. We have a baseline for these accounts. So if someone goes rogue, we're going to see it in the metrics for our data. But we're also going to see it in this dispersion number, because what dispersion tells you is the percentage of tweets that are coming from those unique accounts. So if all the tweets are coming from one account, you're going to have a 0 dispersion. If all the tweets are coming from, you know, if 100 tweets are coming from 100 unique accounts, that's going to be a 1. So a 0 dispersion is coming from one account. A 1 dispersion means that 100% of tweets are coming from unique accounts. So dispersion is a very powerful metric to look at the overall breadth of the conversation. Okay. The S-score, we call this our speedometer. Where is the sentiment for that particular security? You could see for Apple on this particular day, it was negative, wasn't extremely negative, but it's just outside of the neutral range there. So it's not, you know, there could be a lot of other things that are driving the price of Apple instead of sentiment. And then you have a social sentiment trend. So how does that sentiment look over various periods of time? So you have a day, a week, a month, 6 months, as well as a year. So you can see if it's trending higher or lower over periods of time. And it is very interesting to see a longer term sentiment trend with individual, you know, 1 day, 2 day, 3 day trends in the overall sentiment. And there are various time periods associated with that. And then the Twitter volume. So this is not trading volume, this is actual tweet volume. And the color indicates whether sentiment was a change for the positive, green, obviously, or a change for the negative, red. So if you have a couple, and that's just during that period. So you could say, you could have an overall positive sentiment, but during that period, maybe the tweets were overall negative, and that'll eventually bring the sentiment down for that particular security. So this is a sentiment by symbol page, and all of the links on the other 4 pages link back to this page. And then there is also if you click on the eye, that's an information. So we'll see a nice tooltip associated with that, giving you descriptions of the individual items and individual items, as well as you know, any other help. And obviously, if you have questions, you can email Lightspeed or us as well, for sure. And then the last one is the desktop application implementation. It's the same widget, but it's just a little bit different view. So if you happen to be using the desktop application, this is how you will find it. You'll look under new, and then you'll see the exact same widgets that showed up on the web page version of the software. And then here's another sample of the desktop application implementation. So you see a little bit different, but you see the sentiment for that particular security. This is Beyond Meat. S volume, which is your Twitter volume, both positive and negative. Here is your bottom 10 that we just spoke about. So you have SV score and S score. Here is your top 10, S score, SV score. And then you have your speedometer here. Here's your price. And then you have your accurate account positives, as well as your accurate account negative. So you can Now, obviously, this is completely configurable. So those widgets are the same ones that we saw on the web page, and you can turn them on and off however you'd like. Now, I know I tend to speak fast, so I'm hoping we have a half an hour of questions. So are there any questions out there? Anything I can help you guys with?
So Joe, we've got a question from Nick. He wanted to know what the time frame on the S score on the LS Lightspeed Trader desktop is.
All right. So the time frame on the S score, and hang on a second, I want to answer this. The time frame on the S score is a 24-hour summation of those indicative tweet counts. So the tweets that pass the account filter that we scored, positive, negative, or neutral. It's a 24-hour summation, and the baseline is 20 days. Okay. And if you're looking at the predictive power of this data, what we have seen statistically, it's from 1 to 5 days. So we take a summation over the last 24 hours, compare it to a 20-day baseline, and we've seen the predictive nature about 1 to 5 days. I hope that, and maybe I over answered it, but those are the time frame. There is a 12-hour half-life on that 24-hour summation, and so most of the weight on that particular calculation is obviously in the recent conversations associated with it. So any given period, so the data is calculated 1 minute. So there are 3 things that are impacting the sentiment score. It's the data that's coming in that minute, the new Twitter conversation, the stuff that's rolling off 23 hours and 59 minutes ago, and then the exponential decay. So those are 3 variables that are impacting the sentiment score, and they're impacting in a way that we believe gives you the most accurate view of the conversation. What else you guys got?
We've got another question here from Zishan. Is wondering, this is pertaining to the S score as well. Wants to know, are recent tweets weighted more heavily or treated with the same tweets from a couple hours ago?
Yeah, that's a great question, Zishan. It's actually the current tweets are weighted a lot more heavily because of that decay that we put on the data. Yeah, obviously, if you're an investor in ExxonMobil and there's an oil refinery fire, those tweets, because it's coming in right now, are going to have a lot bigger impact on the sentiment score. An interesting side note: we are one of the few firms that breaks out our natural language processing on asset type. So what's interesting, and it's a side note, but if I was looking at ExxonMobil and we were talking about that refinery fire, that would be a negative sentiment for ExxonMobil. But if someone was trading crude futures, that would be you would get a bullish indication on that same tweet for the other asset class, because a refinery fire is generally bullish for crude and bearish for whoever owns the refinery. Total side note, but that's an interesting thing, an interesting nuance of our data. Thanks, Zishan.
Okay, we've got another question as well. So somebody wants to know, do you factor novelty into the scores in any way?
Novelty. I'm not quite sure. Not quite sure what novelty. What you mean by. I guess I don't understand the question, and I apologize.
Sorry about that, Nick. If maybe you could clarify a little bit, we might be able to get you an answer.
Yeah, I would absolutely be happy to answer it, and I apologize again.
Okay, he provided an example. It says, such as Gasparino talked about Amazon, and then others follow up on the tweet.
Yeah, okay. So you're talking about novelty of, yes, as a matter of fact, we do. So you're talking about the novelty of the point being made by whoever tweets that. So what will happen is novelty will be counted a couple of different ways. So first, we'll have the original tweet, okay? And let's say that particular person has a very novel point about whatever it is we're talking about. What will happen is that tweet will start getting responded to. It'll start getting retweeted. The metrics that indicates the level of strength for that particular tweet in our system will basically light up, and so then the novelty will take care of itself with the way that we calculate the metrics. So in effect, new points are weighted much more heavily than something that's generally old, both in time as well as the interaction of, or the web of the conversation. So yes.
So that seems to be all the questions that we have for now. So if you if there was anything that you forgot that you wanted to maybe cover, you've got some time to do that. Otherwise, we can wrap this up as well.
Well, thank you again for having me. It's always fun to come on these, and if anyone has any questions, please follow up. I would be happy to answer your questions. And thank you again, Lightspeed, for having me on.
Thanks so much for being a part of this, Joe. We really appreciate it.